The courtroom was overflowing with people. A sea of faces pressed shoulder to shoulder, all waiting to see the mighty fall. The marble walls echoed with murmurs, and the camera flashes created bursts of white light, like lightning inside a storm. At the center of it all sat Alexander Crane, a man once considered untouchable, a billionaire who had built his empire brick by brick, conquering industries, silencing rivals, and shaping politics. Today, all his power seemed like ash. The charges against him were grave: fraud, embezzlement, corruption. To the outside world, he had become the perfect villain, rich, ruthless, and guilty before the trial even began. Newspapers sold headlines painting him as a criminal mastermind. Former allies had distanced themselves. Shareholders sold his stocks like poison. His empire crumbled faster than sand slipping through fingers. Yet Alexander, even as pressure mounted, had clung to one thing: his legal defense. His lawyer, a polished man in a gray suit named Victor Halloway, was considered the sharpest in the city. Alexander had paid him millions, trusting his brilliance to turn the tide. But as the trial stretched on, Alexander noticed something troubling Victor's. Arguments grew weaker. His energy faded. His confidence faltered. On this day, final hearing, the truth revealed itself. "Your Honor," Victor said, standing tall, his briefcase in hand, "I can no longer represent my client." The words detonated like a bomb. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Porter's pen scratched furiously across notepads. Alexander jumped up, his voice raw with fury. "What? What are you saying?" Victor gave him a glance that was cold, detached, and almost satisfied. "You're finished, Alexander. I won't risk my reputation for a sinking ship. This is where I walk away." "You coward," Alexander spat, his fists clenched. "I made you what you are." But Victor only shrugged, turned his back, and strode out, leaving his billionaire client exposed like prey surrounded by wolves. The judge's gavel slammed. "Order in the court. No defenses presented. This trial will proceed directly to sentencing." The words struck Alexander harder than any fist. For the first time in his life, the man who controlled skyscrapers, who owned islands, who bought senators and presidents, stood powerless. His heart pounded. His throat tightened. He saw everything slipping: his fortune, his freedom, his legacy, and then, against the buzzing chaos, a voice cut through. A voice trembling yet unyielding. "I will defend him." The courtroom froze. The words rang like steel in silence. Heads whipped toward the back. Standing there was Marianne Johnson, Alexander's maid. She wore no fine clothes, no lawyers. Robes, just her simple uniform, the same she wore while polishing floors and carrying trays in his mansion. Her apron was wrinkled, her shoes worn, her hands rough from years of scrubbing and washing. Yet, in her eyes burned a fire that silenced even the mockery rising from the spectators. The judge frowned in confusion. "And who exactly are you?" Marianne stepped forward, her chin lifted, her voice steady. "I'm his maid, Your Honor, and if no one else will defend him, I will." The entire courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted. Lawyers laughed openly. Some spectators sneered, others whispered in disbelief. A maid defending a billionaire. One prosecutor muttered, "This is absurd." Another laughed. Alexander sat frozen in shock. The woman who had quietly cleaned his mansion for years, the one he barely noticed as she blended into the background, now stood before the nation, declaring she would fight for him. The judge rubbed his temples. "This is highly irregular. You are not a licensed attorney." "With respect, Your Honor," Marianne replied firmly, "the law says every man has the right to a defense. If the lawyers are too cowardly to stand by him, then I will. 'Cause truth deserves a voice, even if it comes from a maid." The murmurs quieted. Even the most cynical reporters leaned forward, sensing history in the making. Alexander's eyes locked on her. The first time that day, a flicker of hope stirred in his chest. The judge exhaled, reluctant but impressed by her boldness. "Very well. This is unprecedented, but the court will allow it. Proceed at your own risk." And so it began. The fate of a billionaire now rested in the hands of the one person no one expected: his black maid. Asterisk, the laughter in the courtroom lingered, sharp as knives. Every polished lawyer in the room smirked at Marianne's audacity. What could a maid possibly know about the law? She was nothing but a woman who scrubbed silverware and mopped marble floors. But she stood tall, shoulders squared, facing the judge without flinching. Marianne had been Alexander's maid for nearly 10 years. She had seen him in ways no one else had, when he was tired, when he was sick, when his boardroom mask slipped. She knew the man beyond the headlines. She remembered the nights he returned home with eyes red from exhaustion, the quiet evenings he signed checks for scholarships, the mornings he gave anonymous donations to hospitals. It flaws, plenty of them, but corruption was not one. Of them, I will speak for him, she said again, her voice firmer now. The lead prosecutor, a smug man named Gerald Stone, chuckled. Your Honor, this is a circus. Are we really going to allow this maid to pretend she understands law? The judge glared at him. Mr. Stone, you've been granted every advantage in this trial. If the defense has collapsed, then the defendant has the right to seek alternative representation. Extraordinary circumstances demand extraordinary measures. She will be heard. The prosecutors exchanged looks of disbelief, but Gerald smirked, convinced this would only make Alexander look more foolish. Marianne approached the defense table, her apron brushing against the polished wood. Alexander stared at her, his face pale with shock. Marianne, he whispered, what are you doing? This isn't your fight. She met his eyes, fierce and unyielding. Sir, you gave me work when no one else would. You treated me with respect when others saw me as invisible. You think I'll stand by and watch them destroy you? Not while I still have breath. He swallowed hard, words failing him. For the first time, Alexander saw her not as a maid, but as something far greater. The trial resumed. Gerald Stone strode to the center, his voice booming with confidence. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you see before you is desperation. The defendant has no case, no lawyer, no evidence. All he has is his maid, a woman with no education in law, no experience in court. This is the very definition of hopelessness. The jury nodded, amused. Spectators chuckled. But Marianne stood, lifting her chin. Hopeless, she said. You are mistaken. What you see is courage. Courage to speak truth when every liar in this room has been paid to twist it. Gasps echoed. Even the judge raised his brow. She stepped forward. For years I have worked in his house. I have seen his character in ways you never will. You call him a thief? Saw him give quietly, without cameras, without applause? You call him corrupt? Watched him fight men who wanted him to bribe politicians, and he refused? You call him ruthless? I saw him cry when his company had to lay off workers. I saw him write personal checks to save their homes. That is the man you call a criminal. The jury's expressions shifted, doubt crept in. Gerald Stone tried to cut in, but Marianne's voice grew stronger. No, I don't know the law like you, but I know the truth, and I know lies when I hear them. And today, I will expose them one by one. The courtroom had changed. The maid had become a lioness, and Alexander Crane, for the first time in weeks, felt the weight on his chest begin to lift. Asterisk. The next day, the trial resumed under a storm of media attention. News outlets around the world carried the headline, Billionaire's maid becomes his defender. Some ridiculed her, calling it a stunt. Others praised her bravery. But all eyes were glued to the courtroom. Gerald Stone came armed with evidence, determined to crush her spirit. Exhibit A, he said smugly, presenting financial documents. Proof that Mr. Crane diverted millions from public funds.
I studied
the papers carefully. Her hands trembled. She was no lawyer, but then her memory sharpened. She remembered late nights when she delivered folders to Alexander's office. She remembered overhearing phone calls. She remembered details others overlooked. This is misleading, she declared, her voice steady. That money was not stolen, it was redirected to a trust for disaster relief. I remember because I hand-delivered the signed documents to his study. He told me he wanted it quiet because real charity doesn't need applause. The courtroom buzzed. The prosecutor scowled. Objection. She's speculating. But the judge leaned forward. Overruled. She was a direct witness. Gerald Stone pressed on, growing frustrated. Dud. And what about this offshore accountant? The Cayman Islands? What honest man hides his money there? Marianne's eyes flashed. I cleaned his study every morning. I saw the letters. That account wasn't for luxury, it funded medical clinics in Africa. He hid it because he didn't want corrupt politicians skimming off the funds. Whispers filled the room. The jury leaned in. Stone's confident smirk began to crack. Alexander watched in awe. This woman, this maid, remembered everything. Her years of quiet presence in his house had made her the silent witness to his life. She knew where he had given, where he had refused bribes, where he had chosen integrity over greed. Piece by piece, her testimony dismantled the prosecution's case. Finally, she turned to the jury. You have been told this man is a monster. But I tell you, I saw the man he was when no one was looking. Isn't that the true measure of a person? Not who they are in public, but who they are in private. Her words landed like thunder. Even the most hardened jurors shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, Alexander felt the tide turning. The prosecutors were furious. Their case, once airtight, was crumbling at the hands of a maid. They decided to go for the kill. Gerald Stone rose, his voice dripping with venom. Tell us, Miss Johnson, why should anyone believe you? You're a servant, a woman who depends on his paycheck. Isn't it true that you're only here because your livelihood depends on him? Marianne froze. The jury looked at her, waiting. The reporters leaned closer. The attack had struck deep. She took a breath. Yes, I am his maid. I scrub his floors. I clean his dishes. I wash his clothes, and I am proud of it. Oh. But do you know what else I am? I am a witness. I am the one who saw him at his weakest, when no one else was watching. I am the one who saw the kindness he never bragged about. I am the one who knows the truth. And I would risk everything, even my job, even my freedom, to speak it. Courtroom was silent. Her words carried the weight of sacrifice. She was not speaking for money. She was speaking because her conscience demanded it. Stone sneered, but the damage was done. The jury's eyes softened toward her. The judge gave a small nod of respect. Alexander leaned closer to her, whispering, Marianne, I don't deserve this. She looked at him firmly. And make yourself deserving. If you walk out of this free, live in a way that honors the truth I've spoken. He nodded, his eyes wet. The trial dragged into its final hours. Stone delivered. His closing argument, fiery and aggressive. But his words rang hollow, desperate. Then Marianne rose for the final defense. Her voice was soft, but every ear strained to hear. You've heard their evidence? You've seen their papers? But I've given you something they can't, truth from a witness who has nothing to gain. You must decide. Do you believe the polished lies of men paid to win? Or do you believe the simple truth of a maid who has nothing but her word? Jury's eyes glistened. Her words cut through all the noise. The court recessed. The jury retired. The world held its breath. Hours dragged like years. Alexander sat motionless, staring at the table. Marianne sat beside him, her hands folded, whispering silent prayers. Outside, crowds swarmed the courthouse, chanting, waiting, debating. Finally, the jury returned. The foreman stood, voice trembling. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. The courtroom exploded. Half relief. Reporters shouted. Spectators screamed. Gerald Stone slammed his papers in fury. Act. But Alexander heard nothing. Act. His world had narrowed to the woman beside him. Marianne exhaled, tears glistening in her eyes. Alexander turned to her, his voice breaking. You saved me. She looked at him, steady and calm. No, sir, only spoke the truth. The rest is up to you. And then, in front of the world. Alexander Crane, a billionaire who had bowed to no one, lowered his head in gratitude to his maid. The cameras flashed, immortalizing the image. The man of power, humbled. The woman of humility, victorious. And history would forever remember the day a maid saved a billionaire. Not with law, not with money, but with truth. Asterisk.